All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our last week of National Safety Month. I cannot believe it's the last week already. June just kind of flew by. Uh, but we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of National Safety Month. We're in week four, specifically looking at preventing slips, trips, and falls. And we've got a really excellent discussion today on some of the technology that's looking at that and other issues as well. So we're really excited to jump into that. Jake, if you want to take us to the next slide. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the Work to Zero program hosting this webinar. So the Work to Zero program, if you're not familiar, I'm Dr. Matt Wall. I'm the director of the program. We are a grant-funded program partnered with the McElhatton Foundation with a specific mission to eliminate workplace fatalities by the year 2050 using emerging technology. And we do that through a few different approaches. If you want to go to the next slide, Jake. Um, so who do we serve? We really work with companies and organizations that are operating in the non-transportation space. Now, the National Safety Council has some other functions that specifically look at transportation, but we are working specifically with high-risk industries and non-transportation, construction, materials moving, occupations, things like that. Um, and we also work with our technology solution providers who are ready to bring their innovative technologies to market. And we do this through things like the Tech Hub Marketplace and, of course, the Safety Innovation Challenge. So we have three approaches. We perform a lot of research. This is to not only uncover the types of technology that are out there that can address fatalities, but also look at the real world outcomes for technology when it's implemented. So how does it affect injuries and fatalities? How does it affect operational efficiency and things like technology acceptance and worker comfort? So that's all the research that we do. We've got a lot on the Work to Zero website. I encourage you to check it out. We take this research and we develop education. A lot of materials available to our members, to the general public on what we found related to technology that's specifically targeting workplace fatalities. And of course, we develop partnerships. So we have a lot of strong partnerships with trade associations, with our technology developers, and of course, with a lot of you that are on this call to make sure that we're getting that information out to the end user. And they know how to implement technology responsibly and effectively. So we've also developed our safety innovation journey. This is uh, basically a model to help you implement technology responsibly and effectively. It always starts with the problem. You have to assess your risk, understand what hazards and what issues you're facing in the workplace. If you're not facing slips, trips, and falls hazards, then maybe we're not looking at technology specifically for that. Maybe we need to look at lockout, tagout. Start with the problem, and then you identify the tech solutions. We also have tools to be able to determine your readiness. We have a digital readiness assessment that will really identify where you are as an organization and if you are ready to implement innovative technologies. We have tools to help you build the business case, including our return on investment calculators and some other things to help you identify both the tangible and intangible benefits of using innovative technologies and ways to build your roadmap for success in the future. And we'll go to the next slide. So our Tech Hub Marketplace, this is where we house all of our Tech Hub partners. We have 30 partners listed on the website right now. This is a searchable directory if you are specifically looking for safety technology, whatever it might be, whether it be wearable tech or artificial intelligence or some of the software applications. Any of those things can be found on the Tech Hub Marketplace. Encourage you to check that out. These are all partners that NSC, the Work to Zero program, actively works with to address fatalities in the workplace. And then finally, if you'd like to learn more about the Work to Zero program, please go to nsc.org/work to zero. And if you'd like to reach out to us, please email us at worktozero@nsc.org. And with that, I think we will jump into today's presentation. So I'm happy to turn this over to Anna from Makusafe and Jake from Benchmark Gensuite. They're going to talk about best practices for digital solutions in EHS sustainability, quality, risk, and disclosure, um, and operationalizing frontline safety with connected AI and worker insights. So, Anna, Jake, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, everyone from NSC and everyone attending for this webinar. We're super excited for today's discussion. I'm Jake. I'm a director here at Benchmark GenSuite. My area of expertise is primarily around frontline worker safety. So I'll be leading the first half of our discussion today, talking through how you can use some of the technology and digital solutions within our platform to help lower and decrease the severity of slip, trip, and fall hazards, as well as any other frontline safety hazards. I've been in this space for the last 5 years or so, and I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm looking forward to engaging with you all today. Anna, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jake. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here this morning. Yes, my name is Anna Hoke. I am the director of a partner ecosystem at Make You Safe. Like Jake, I've been in this space for about 5 to 6 years and love it. I love everything that you as safety leaders and practitioners are doing to keep workers safe. And I love it that we have a technology and I work in a space that is enabling you to do that better and more efficiently and with more success. So I'm happy to dive into this with you. And just a little plug for the Tech Hub Marketplace. Make You Safe is also a member of that, and you can find out more about our solution through that marketplace. So thanks for the NSC and everything you're doing to improve safety.
Yeah.
Jake?
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. All right. So before we get in, just want to orient everyone with a quick agenda. We will obviously spend the bulk of our time today actually looking at some of the solutions that both Make You Safe and Benchmark GenSuite provide. But before we jump into that, we do want to talk a little bit around what we're calling the frontline reality gap. This is something that I think both Make You Safe and Benchmark GenSuite really prioritize as we think about our solutions and partnering with you all as practitioners to help lower frontline slip, trip, and fall hazards and really any other hazards that are facing frontline workers. And we'll talk through, what is that gap and how do we close it, which is very well aligned with the Work to Zero initiative and how we think through decreasing workplace fatalities by 2050. And then, of course, we'll do a quick demonstration. But we would also really like to have questions and comments in the Q&A. So please do feel free to chime in there. We're going to start momentarily here with a brief poll. It may already have gone up, but would love to see some interaction from you all and think through how you're thinking about frontline safety conditions when it comes either to slip, trip, and fall hazards or beyond that as well. What sort of visibility you have. We'll spend a little bit of time thinking through this. You feel like you're capturing real-time data directly from the point of work. Maybe you're capturing data, but it's delayed or incomplete. Maybe it's limited in some capacity. I know none of us like lagging indicators, but sometimes that's the reality. And then would also want to hear a little bit more about, hey, we haven't made the pivot to digital yet or any other technology solution. We're primarily using paper to capture those hazards. So I'll pause for just a minute or two here to capture what the results are. I think it'll be really interesting to kind of ground our conversation before we jump into the discussion.
Jake, can you see the poll?
I
I've
can
launched
see
it.
it.
Can you
Yep.
see? Okay.
I just can't vote, which is good. So you don't want the panelists voting. So yeah. Yeah, we'll leave it up for maybe just a few moments here. I don't think I can see the results. So Hannah or Anna, if you can see the results, if you can see what kind of the trends are coming in so far, that would be really curious to see that.
I'll go on ahead and end the poll.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, excellent. So it sounds like everyone's kind of right in the middle here. 51% are in that partial bucket. 16% are strong, very excellent. 26% are in limited, and then 7% primarily paper-based. So thank you. Yeah, that's a really important, I think, grounding point. And that's probably around what I would have expected, which I think is just kind of further underlines the value of what we're going to talk about today. So what is the frontline reality gap? This is something that I'm particularly passionate about. I know Anna is as well. Really for the last few decades, I think as EHS practitioners have kind of evolved safety programs, we've gotten really good at developing compliance programs and making sure that we can deploy our EHS programs across the enterprise in a really scalable way. However, what we found as we kind of talked with more of our subscriber communities and with the market as well, is there's a lot more pressures as we get into 2026 that are challenging EHS organizations. And so what does that look like? We did put out a white paper about this. Our CEO primarily was the author on that. So if you want to check it out, we certainly can look to explore that. But really, there's a convergence of a few key factors influencing how you can capture data from the front line. Obviously, expanding responsibilities every year. Each one of you is charged with producing more, both as an enterprise, but also as an EHS program. Workforce instability, obviously, actually maintaining the number of frontline workers and hiring is always a consistent challenge. Finding ways to engage your frontline workers and really all workers across your business continues to be a challenge, right? As you have generations, folks retiring, newer folks entering the workforce, finding ways to evolve your EHS program so it's still engaging. And then lastly, which is what I think we'll spend a lot of time talking about today, is fragmented technology. Like we showcased in that poll there, most of the folks on this call are in that partial bucket. They're capturing some data from the field, but maybe not all the data that they want. You're using multiple different systems for different things. You have your telematics tools, you have your EHS system, you have your LMS system, you have maybe wearables you maybe you're thinking about using today, but none of that information is necessarily talking to one another. And so all of those compounding factors create what we call the frontline reality gap, which is you have enterprise expectations on what your EHS programs look like directly at the point of work, and then you have the frontline reality. And oftentimes those expectations and the performance don't cleanly line up to one another. And of course, underneath all of that is the risk. It can be hard to tell where our next instance will happen. Of course, we don't necessarily can predict those things, but maybe we can see a heat map of where we're more likely to come across those risks. And where that happens kind of is really highlighted by this chart here. It's hard to predict where that risk is. And so what we want to do as partners for your enterprises is really give you the tools to identify those risks sooner and really make sure you can be proactive about limiting the impact of those. And so how do we do this, right? That's the real question about what we're talking about. So like I really kicked off our conversation, I think the last 20 years, we've really gotten good in the EHS community of kind of developing policies and management systems and then kind of thinking about the frontline reality as an important piece, but maybe not necessarily at the forefront of our EHS programs. So we have systems to manage compliance. We have lagging indicators like TRIR. We have the kind of the black box of, do we really know what's happening directly at the front line, especially if those systems are trapped on paper? How are we going to actually tell if we don't see a JSA until months after the fact when a service truck comes in for maintenance? And all this creates a situation where maybe your frontline workers know the risk, but the EHS programs aren't necessarily informed by those things in the way that they could be. As we think about the future, I think what we're hoping to build more is a frontline first or kind of bottom up EHS program. This means you can capture reliable frontline data from your frontline workers. How do we do that? We'll give you the tools to talk through it, whether that's through mobile or through wearables. Find ways to easily see leading indicators. You can use, obviously, the technology to capture things like image analysis with artificial intelligence. You can use voice capture to capture rich contextual data with a very simple just button tap on your shoulder. And then, of course, those inputs give you the ability to feed that into your management system, which will be AI enabled and really deliver what we're calling enterprise EHS intelligence. And so closing that gap, we think, requires this approach. And so really the core thrust of this webinar will be focused on how do we do those things with some of the tools from Benchmark Gensuite and Makusafe. So before we get into the demonstration, I do want to just hit on a couple key things as we think about frontline first EHS, and I think this dovetails well into what we were just talking about. As you think about your enterprise, a lot of the folks on this call likely are falling into what we call the EHS manager or EHS executive persona. So the way you use your management systems and technology is going to ultimately be really framed around the core responsibilities of your roles. But as you think about the different personas across your business, you likely have many more. You have frontline workers, which we'll spend a lot of time talking about today. You have your site leaders and foremen. You may also have other business stakeholders on the operations team, the maintenance team, et cetera, that you're working with. And so all of those different personas want to use technology in different ways. And so that ultimately means for you all, you need to have different solutions that really speak to the challenges that each of these personas face and deliver things that are very tailored and make sense to those users. So for frontline workers, we'll spend a lot of time on that today. We've developed a solution called Frontline Operations, which is super simple and easy to use. It's very flexible, and it's really meant for a frontline worker to easily fill out critical procedures like pre-task assessments, inspections, HOP programs, lockout, tagout, forms, checklists, you name it, in a very digestible way, one step at a time directly at the point of work. And really what this allows for them to have is almost like a safety coach in their pocket where they're capturing information in real time, getting analysis from AI on any of the hazards that they've identified. And also all of that data is instantly rolling up in dashboards so you all can see what's going on directly at the point of work, regardless of where you're at all over the globe. We've seen this deliver some real outcomes for our enterprise clients and really clients of all different sizes. But of course, it's super flexible. It's almost a consumer grade interface. It's as easy as using Facebook or Instagram for your frontline workers, and they're still filling out this critical information that you can use to lower your the severity and the number of your recordable incidents, which is what we've seen. You can see that testimonial there. So we'll spend a little bit of time jumping into that in just a moment. We'll also talk through kind of how this works from a core workflow standpoint. So your frontline workers, they begin their day by checking out a MakuSafe Ally, a wearable. They start their pre-job safety assessment, and right away that information is visible on your desktop in real time. So that connected worker is seeing all the information for you all as EHS executives. As they find hazards in the field or any issues, we can automatically trigger text and email notifications to EHS leaders or supervisors, so you're finding out about these things in real time, rather than finding out them long after the fact. As we go through those issues that are identified, you can work with your frontline workers to determine if work should be stopped or if work can continue safely. And then based on the insights that we've captured from those procedures, we can use the data that we're capturing, and you all as EHS managers and practitioners can go in and say, hey, these were our top risks that we're identifying. How can we use that information to kind of continue this flywheel to inform the questions we're asking in the pre-job assessments, to inform how we're using the wearables? Maybe we need to deploy it further across our insights, across our enterprise rather, and really continue capturing those insights. So I know that's a lot of slides, but wanted to make sure we had a chance to kind of ground everybody in how we're thinking about this challenge of frontline first EHS. And now we'll get into the specific tools you can use to actually do that. So I'll stop sharing my slides here and we will jump into the demonstration. Let me just close out some of these windows. So first things first, I'm going to pull up my mobile device that I'll use as a frontline worker. So this is the Benchmark Gensuite Frontline Operations Platform. This is a tool that we've used in many different industries to really transform the way that frontline workers engage with your EHS programs. This app works on any device, so Android, iOS, tablets, Surface, etc., and really begins by taking the frontline worker to this menu right here. This is meant to be a one-stop shop of any of the procedures that they're doing in the shop or in the field that they can easily complete on any device. This also all works offline, as does the MakuSafe wearables. So if you have a footprint with a large number of field employees that are using these technologies in areas where internet connectivity is not a sure thing, they can still follow this exact same process, and all the data will sync automatically when they reconnect to the internet. So here's just an example pre-job safety assessment. Really from here on out though, one of the biggest things I want to share is everything I'm showing you is completely customizable to your specific needs. Why is that so important? If frontline workers don't see their specific language and the way they see the work reflected in this solution, it's going to be really hard for you to get them to adopt it, right? It needs to be digestible and relevant to them. So you can customize this really at any given point in time, and then also use the data that you're capturing with tools like this to inform those questions. Let's get started by describing the job. So here I will go in and click my voice to text button. Obviously, frontline workers, you can imagine, they generally have gloves on. It can be hard to type on a mobile device. Dock leveler, bay 4 check, panel reset and cycle test. Dock area looked clear enough at first glance. Normal traffic, wet floor from open door, pallet staged on the left. Trailer backed in on right. And then, of course, we can add photos and videos. And this is really one of the first places where the technology can come into play to help your frontline workers identify slip, trip, and fall hazards. Here's my example job photo. So I'm going to go ahead and take a picture of that right now. And you'll notice I can annotate and draw attention to any areas of concern in this photo. It is a little dark and dingy. And what we can do is go down and press our AI review button. This is a relatively new feature. We talked about this a couple months ago at our customer conference, and we're excited to talk about this at Congress in a few months. This is what we call Frontline Vision AI. What Frontline Vision AI is purpose-built to do is really act as that safety coach in a frontline worker's pocket. What it'll do is it'll take the job information that they're providing about the work they're doing that day, and it'll look through any of the images that they're capturing and ultimately summarize what are some of the hazards it sees and provide some recommended actions. Prior to being in the role I'm in today, I worked with a lot of our customers. And one of the things that I found that was so interesting is that for many of your organizations, you're often outnumbered, maybe hundreds, 200 or 300 to 1 when it comes to frontline workers to EHS managers. So we've challenged ourselves to think through how can we scale the expertise of EHS leaders using artificial intelligence. This is one way you can do that, right? Frontline Vision will go in and basically look through the hazards, provide some recommended actions. It'll also provide some positive coaching as well, saying, hey, consider routing or securing those tables. It looks like there's a slip, trip, and fall hazards there. Place wet floor signage or caution markers in the immediate work zone. Consider establishing a brief parameter to manage foot traffic around the active dock level during testing. So this is what we mean in just a few clicks, right? This frontline worker is getting very specific coaching on the job they're working on that day by using the Frontline Vision AI. Of course, as we continue, we'll save that response so you can all look at that. Additionally, with our frontline operations solution, it's very dynamic depending on the hazards they select. So here's a really good example of this. If I don't select all PPE that is required for this job, you'll notice that it'll prompt me to say, hey, you didn't select all PPE. Why is this not necessary? If I go back and do select everything, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. And all those responses are time and date stamped, but that makes this more engaging than filling out a paper form or a checklist, because depending on the selections that they make and depending on the hazards that they identify, you can set thresholds that will route them down specific follow-up paths so that we're escalating any of the concerns that they have or triggering alerts and text notifications to you all. So I'll press yes to move forward here. We, of course, can do numerical entry as well. We also can incorporate reference content. This is something that our subscriber community has really taken hold of in the last few months. Any sort of reference images or materials that you would like to associate with any of the critical procedures they're doing. Maybe you have rubrics or micro training videos that you would like them to digest as they're going through this. Happy to do that as well. And of course, at any given point in time, we give frontline workers the ability to stop work. This will automatically trigger a text and email notification directly to their supervisor or to you all as the EHS managers, or both, and actually prompt the user to call for additional assistance, right? So this is intervening really early in this process. Hey, depending on the selections you've selected here, we identified this as a high-risk situation. We're going to trigger a stop to your supervisor and to the EHS team so we can figure out how to move forward. So this is all happening in real time, and this is what we mean by frontline first EHS, right? To really making this super digestible and reflecting the reality of the work at hand, and then triggering our alerts and notifications and the data capture to really be informed by that process. So I'll pick back up from where I left off. Of course, you also can embed any of the reference content like we talked about, but anything like links to content or URLs. If you have your SDS system embedded in this tool, you of course can do that also. I just want to make sure my link worked here. There we go. Or any other URLs to your LMS, to any other tools you're using internally, that's of course can easily be incorporated. We can add employees on site as drop-downs as well. And then of course, last but not least, you can easily go in here and add additional details. There's my signature, and we can move forward. So I know I went through that relatively quickly here, but just wanted to highlight the flexibility of this frontline tool. And this is what we mean by kind of frontline first EHS, persona-based technology solutions. This is something that's very digestible and easy for frontline workers to use. We're often seeing adoption rates within the first 30 days to be upwards of 90% with this tool, just because of how simple and easy it is. So imagine if you were trying to roll out a software program and over 90% of your team members would use it right away, your frontline workers. You'd probably be pretty happy with the ROI of that. And I think the intelligent design around making this very digestible for frontline workers starts with there. So now that we've completed just an example pre-job safety assessment, let's talk through what the reporting looks like for these tools. Switching personas by going up the ladder, so to speak, to a supervisor or foreman, or for you all as EHS leaders. This is what we call our manager dashboard. What the manager dashboard is really meant to do is give you that live feed to see all the different processes that are currently in flight at your given organization. So we break this down by a couple different buckets, but you can sort and filter by pretty much anything. You can break things down by particular hazards if you'd like, what's triggering stops and notifications, interventions and flags, concern reports. And we also do have an approvals capability, which I could probably do a whole nother webinar talking about. But going in here, let's look at our actual pre-job safety assessment. You can see that everything has been time and date stamped. Our Frontline Vision AI review has been fully incorporated here as well. So we can easily see kind of the individual breakdowns and the hazards that we are identifying with Frontline Vision and AI. And of course, we can scroll down and see each one of these. Any one of these findings, we can automatically create corrective actions on as well. So in your corrective action tracking system, we have one here at Benchmark Gensuite, but any other tool could also be plugged into this as well. You can create corrective actions depending on these findings. You'll notice that even though I changed my answer, both responses are captured. That's really critical, right? We want to make sure people aren't pencil whipping through these. A pencil whipped digital form is just as bad as a pencil whipped paper form. So if people are going to be rushing through and not answering each question, let's make sure they capture all those. As we scroll down, we can see our stop. Same process. We can also use this to create a corrective action as well. And then last but not least, we can go down at the very bottom of the page and complete our review. Once we complete our review, this time and date stamps this workflow indicating that someone has actually looked through it. This is, I think, is one of the ways that we're really able to drive adoption in a Frontline First EHS program. If frontline workers don't see that people are engaging with the data that they capture directly at the point of work, they're not going to buy into your program. So what this tool allows you to do is basically indicate very clearly, hey, someone took the time to look through this. You don't have to do it on every single workflow or every single JSA that you see, but it's amazing how even just doing these at a handful at a time really make a difference in driving that flywheel of continuous improvement from capturing the information from frontline workers, taking action on it, and really showing your work, showing that we did use that information to inform our safety program, really starts that flywheel of adoption. Last but not least, obviously we could talk a ton about analytics. I know all of you will really want to focus on that, especially for those of you who are executives or really looking at things from a process improvement standpoint. We do integrate with Tableau and Power BI, and of course this data is available via API if you want to pull it into your own data warehouses, so you can really dive in a little bit further. But the last piece I wanted to highlight was mainly around our frontline insights. And so what insights is really meant to do is think about, hey, now that we're capturing all this information, how can we deliver really digestible hazard overviews and recommendations to more of a supervisor persona? Supervisors probably are not going to be going into Power BI dashboards and drilling down and looking at all the individual slip, trip, and fall hazards, right? What they're more likely to do is look through kind of what are some very curated, specific overviews of the hazards that their team is most likely to face, and what are some practical recommendations that we can do about those hazards. So here's an example of that. Insights is looking at our top hazards. We can see a couple of our examples here. There's our slip, trip, and fall hazards. And you'll notice I'll say, hey, an active slip, trip, and fall exists on the dock. Immediately clean this up and barricade. Here's our OSHA standard. Establish a spill response protocol and designated personnel to clean up materials. It's probably a little small to read. I'll zoom in on my screen here, but that's what that looks like. So again, this isn't just capturing data for data's sake. This is capturing data, giving it to an AI model that'll actually look through it and find the evidence, find the recommendations, and make it a very digestible format for your supervisors to easily capture and take corrective actions on. So I know that's a lot of information to look through in a lot of ways, but I kind of wanted to architect what Frontline First EHS can look like from more of a software standpoint in terms of making it super simple for frontline workers to input data into your system, and then using AI in the flow of work to capture image hazards and analysis, and then also really act as that first line of reporting for supervisors to get super digestible insights that are very specific to them and their operations. So I'll pause there and we'll see. I don't know if there's any immediate questions in the chat, but I'll hand things over to Anna here in just a moment. But just want to see if there's Matt or Hannah, if there's any quick questions specifically on Frontline that we want to hit before we hand things off to Anna.
No,
No
sir.
questions right now.
Okay, perfect. I know we've got some time saved at the end, so that'll be excellent. So
Yeah.
I will resume sharing here. Let me get the deck pulled back up. And Anna, I'll turn things over to you in just a sec.
Great.
Oh,
Well, thanks, Jake. As you're pulling that up, what you just saw from Benchmark Gensuite is the workflow side of things and workflow side with frontline safety. And it elegantly captures what workers are doing, what they're flagging, what's getting escalated, and how to follow up. What I'm going to show you this morning is what's really happening kind of between those moments, right? But before I do, I also want to kind of ground our conversation in something actually also from what Benchmark's CEO Mokun said recently about the data compiled and reported in a Benchmark Gensuite 2026 report, because I think it really does capture exactly why we're here today. He wrote, what emerges from the data is a convergence of pressures, expanding responsibilities, workforce instability, worker engagement friction, and fragmented technology are contributing to a growing visibility gap. Closing that gap will define the next phase of EHS performance. And then he said something that I think could have been written as Makusafe's mission statement. He wrote, leading organizations are rethinking how safety aligns with modern operations, making reporting accessible at the point of work, connecting data across workflows, and using technology to surface risks earlier, not just document them after the fact. And I think that last phrase, surface risks earlier, not just document them after the fact, is really important. And that's exactly what Makusafe was built to do, not just documenting them after the fact, but really looking at it from the frontline first perspective. And that's kind of our simple belief, is that safety has to be frontline first, not policy first, not necessarily compliance first, but frontline first, meaning that the people who are doing the work in the environment where the work happens in real time. And yes, we have a poll. I think that we want to pause here and ask the question is, where do you believe the biggest safety visibility gap exists in your organization today? So Hannah, if you want to go ahead and throw that poll up there, and we'll get some answers. Is it hazards that never get reported, risk we identify too late, limited frontline worker engagement, or the data spread across multiple systems? Take a moment here and go ahead and register your vote. Okay.
Got about
Hannah,
a third of respondents. Let's
okay.
give it. I'm hoping to get to maybe 50% of respondents before I close the poll.
Love it.
All right, we hit 50%, so I'll go on ahead and close the poll and keep us moving along.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so 41% say it's hazards that never get reported, 27% risk we identify too late, 20% limited frontline worker engagement, and 12% data spread across multiple systems. This is pretty consistent with what we're hearing, right? Getting those hazards at the point of work reported by the people who are actually doing the work. Thanks, Hannah. And Jake, if you want to go ahead and advance the slides. Might just one more slide, Jake, that'd be great. Yeah, so Makusafe is a leader in workforce wearables, but I do want to be careful about that word wearable, because people hear it and they immediately think about surveillance, right? They think of tracking, they think of Big Brother, but that's not what this is. What a Makusafe wearable actually is, it's a safety advocate that goes to work with you. It's the thing that notices your environment getting dangerous before you do. It's what captures that near miss that really never gets reported because the worker was either embarrassed or too busy or just didn't think it was worth the paperwork or effort. It's what gives a worker who possibly speaks Spanish on an English-speaking floor the same ability to raise a safety concern as anyone else on that site. It's not watching the worker, it's watching out for the worker. And that's really the distinction. Watching out for versus watching over is what really makes frontline first safety technology work, because a frontline first approach means the technology has to first serve the worker, it has to earn their trust, and it has to capture what's actually happening at the point of work, not what gets reported hours later through some form. The data we collect flows in real time to the MakuSmart cloud. It's where AI surfaces the patterns that start to predict risk before an incident actually ever occurs. It's a pretty powerful tool. But let's actually look at this now ally, what is actually doing the collecting. So this is what we call our ally, the hardware behind all the data gathering. This ally clips into our comfortable and rugged armband. It runs 22 plus hours on a charge, and it can cover multiple shifts. There's really no behavior change required from the worker, and no personal or biometric data is collected from the worker either. What makes it different is what it's sensing. And there are really four categories of the data that we're gathering. The first is motion detection. So we're picking up on those forceful motions, right? We're looking at repetitive motions, push pulls, and yes, even those slips, trips, and falls that occur. We're looking at the MSD risks that are completely invisible to really any paper-based or app-based systems. We're also looking at the ever-changing environmental sensors and conditions around individual workers. So temperature, humidity, air quality, TVOCs and CO2. We're looking at noise dosage, ambient light, air pressure. If a worker is entering a space with a rising CO2 level or a noise environment that's going to exceed safe exposure limits, we know it and we're going to report on it in real time. We're also looking at spatial awareness, so location within a facility, worker-to-worker proximity, forklift and PIV safety through our Scout integration. When a forklift and pedestrian worker are converging in a blind corner in a unseen area in an environment, the system knows it. It's recording it. It's better understanding those interactions between workers and equipment. And finally, my voice. And I'm going to actually wait on this and I'm going to come back to this because it might be the most important one to talk about today is giving that frontline worker a voice. So all of this is really frontline first design and practice. The ally doesn't ask the worker to do really anything differently. It just listens, it senses, and transmits. So the data exists whether or not anyone thought to report something. Go ahead, Jake. So what does all this motion data actually look like on the platform? So this is Motion Explorer, and this is where every worker wearing an ally shows up. They show up ranked by their physical demand level, and you can see at a glance who's having a high exertion day, and critically, when something in their pattern has possibly changed. So we're taking a look at Danny Rodriguez. So you can see that there was a shift in his data, and all this data is not just data for his data's sake, but it's actually telling a story, right? What happened to Danny? He had high forceful motion. He came into contact with a team member. Maybe he's experienced a lot of fatigue, or maybe something on his process has changed. But you can see at the point when he actually had a conversation with a safety leader, and said, "Hey, we need to put a control in place," right? And his day and his activity level changed. So the data really tells you the story of where that happened, where that control was put in place, and how that affected Danny's physicality and forceful motions throughout his shift. And this is exactly what was described in that Benchmark Gensuite report earlier. It's surfacing risk earlier, not just documenting it after the fact. You're not waiting for an injury report. You're seeing the precursor to injuries. Well, there's still time to intervene on this worker's behalf. And that's really what Frontline First EHS looks like in practice. Go ahead, Jake. So now I want to go back and talk a little bit more about my voice and the voice of the frontline worker. All the sensor data in the world can tell you what is happening. And the My Voice tells you what workers are thinking about it. So with one button press on our ally, any worker can record a voice message in whatever language they speak. The system transcribes it, translates it, and surfaces it to safety managers immediately. So here's an example of a worker named Ian. Ian flags an open electrical panel with exposed wires. So one button press on the ally, 6 seconds, no app, no form, no friction, no fear, just I see a hazard and here it is. I want to report it right away. This is Frontline First at its purest form. You're removing every barrier between a worker's observation and the people who can actually act on it. And so if you think about on the management side, the management persona, this message surfaces and gives you two options. You can archive it because you know about it, you've seen it, or you can do something about it. You can create a hazard, or you can create a task. And this is, I think, where it's really exciting to be presenting now with Benchmark GenSuite, because now this message and the contextual data can flow directly into Benchmark GenSuite's concern reporting, incident report, and action management workflow. So you have one signal, two systems, a closed loop with no visibility gap. And for those multilingual workforces, for workers who've maybe never felt like they've had a voice in safety, this really changes the dynamic entirely. Go ahead, Jake. So I want to close my section and my time on something that really doesn't show up on a spec sheet, but it's the reason any of this actually works at scale. And it's when wearable technology is, it only works if workers wear it, right? And if workers only wear it if they actually trust the technology. So Makusafe was built around a principle from day one, and that is where we follow the work and not the worker. When the system flags a high noise dosage risk, it's not flagging that person, it's flagging that location, that process, that shift pattern. The insight is about the work environment and not the individual performance. When repetitive motion risk surfaces, it's not a necessarily disciplinary flag. It's a signal that the job design may be creating injury risk for anyone who actually does that same job. And this is what makes Frontline first approach sustainable. When workers understand the technology is there to protect them, not just monitor them, they become advocates. We see it happen across manufacturing and logistics, food processing, you name it. And it connects directly back to what Jake showed us as kind of a path forward, right? Making reporting accessible at the point of work, connecting data across your workflows, using technology to surface and report on that risk earlier. And Makusafe supports that. And when you pair that trusted work signal, all this really rich contextual data with the structured data that Benchmark GenSuite and the Frontline Operations app Anvil captures, you can close that visibility gap that neither solution really can close alone on its alone. So yeah, compliance systems tells you what should happen, super important. Frontline technology tells you what is happening. And I really think that the organizations who are going to close that gap are going to go Frontline first. And they're going to, just really lead safety into this next decade. So with that, I'm going to stop and I'll hand it back to Jake and go into a little bit more of a QA and understanding a little bit more how we're working together.
Yeah, Anna, excellent. Yes, I think a lot of great takeaways there. Thank you so much for talking us through that. I think a lot of just natural kind of rhyming between the two solutions, which is why we're so excited to talk through this together. So to wrap up, would encourage you all, if you have questions, we have time to take some Q&A. That's what this is all about. Would love some to hear what you were thinking about and if this has kind of prompted any conversation. So while you're thinking through that, I think the core takeaways from this webinar really are summarized very well in these 3 bullet points. And Anna wrapped this up well, I think, as well. We know kind of what will happen, and what should happen is the Frontline kind of focus for the last, the EHS focus for the last 20 or so years. We need to think and focus on, as we think about the next 10 years of EHS and preventing slip, trip, and falls and any frontline hazard beyond that, how can we use technology to really inform the way we're approaching that? That all begins by capturing reliable data. So as Anna put so well, you have to lower the barrier to capture more and more information. You have the behavioral data from an app-based system like Benchmark and our Frontline Operations tool, obviously physiological information, and from the wearable and just kind of the atmosphere and environment as well. And then together, we really can help you enable the Frontline First EHS program that we really kicked off this conversation about, and that benchmarking report that we put out at the beginning of this year talks about. So that's some of our key takeaways. We'll love to kind of transition here to Matt. If we have some questions from the Q&A, we'll happily handle those. And I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, let's start with this first question. So, I've got one that's asking if you can share how the tool is customizable for each organization.
Yeah, great question. So I can handle the first part. I'm guessing that's probably mostly related to Frontline Ops. So we didn't have time necessarily to get into the demonstration of that today, but in terms of the customizability of the platform, we really made a big investment in artificial intelligence to kind of help enable you to do the drag and drop form building that you've probably seen in many software solutions. very easily on your own. So what does that mean? That means you upload an existing paper-based document or digital form or even an email or just an idea that you have for a new procedure to our Mobilize artificial intelligence tool. And what that'll do is it'll look through that document. It'll also look at relevant standards related to your specific industry, OSHA, your international footprint, et cetera. And it'll develop that step-by-step workflow. It definitely won't replace a human doing that work, but the goal is for it to be at least 70 or 80% of the way there so that you can go in and make any of those changes. And of course, that AI tool, as well as Frontline Vision, like we talked about earlier, is all hidden behind a firewalled LLM. So this is not publicly sharing your information with OpenAI or anything like that. It's all specific to you. So the short answer is super customizable. We use AI to make it even easier because that's the trade-off with customizability is you kind of have to do a lot of the work to do the customizing. And now, you all are at your best when you're with frontline workers, not managing software. So we want to make it as easy as possible for you to create and customize those programs. Yeah, great
Awesome.
question.
Next question. What is the focal length of Frontline Vision to identify hazards in the workplace?
Focal length. I don't know if I know what that means. That's a good question.
I don't know what it means either.
I'll have to look that up. But if kind of the how in depth can it go? That's a great question. So this is our first version of that. One of the things we're looking to do in the next, in the near future is really give you the ability to kind of customize what Frontline Vision is looking for. Right now, it's very specific on safety, operational, and even quality hazards. We have a lot of folks using the Frontline Ops tool for their quality auditing programs. So that's kind of the focus. And again, it's mainly going to be operating as a safety coach. So kind of providing, hey, well, maybe here's something that you missed. Here's some recommended actions, et cetera. But I'll have to look up focal length and see what that is. That's
Yeah,
great.
I'm also thinking like if it has to do with like how far away from the hazard can you be for it to identify it.
Yeah, that's a good. It would just be. I mean, it would be a good question to test out. I haven't tested that specifically, but I hadn't had any issues with it not identifying hazards, if that makes sense. So
Fair.
just probably be reliant on your phone and what it's capturing. So
Okay.
yeah, great question.
Next question. So of course, frontline workers have been using paper forms and checklists for years. So, what actually gets them to engage with these mobile or wearable tools instead of seeing it as just one more thing to do?
Yeah, Anna, do you want to take that one to start?
Yeah, certainly. It's interesting. I think well, we go back to the poll question I asked, and it's not getting enough near miss reporting. And I think because there has been that friction of having to leave their job or their task and go fill out a paper form and that sort of thing. So really what we've designed or we're able to do is to be friction free, to be at being able to report at the point of work. And so it's actually supporting the efficiency and efficacy of reporting from the frontline worker. And so the lift isn't too huge. It's a matter of just checking out a device at the start of the shift, and removing kind of that paper barrier there.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think the only thing that I would add as well is, and this is something that informs our implementation approach with frontline workers, is you just can't ever get enough champion feedback. That would be my biggest recommendation for implementing our tools or implementing any other tools within your business is, again, it's really hard to know exactly what will work and not work. And so it's great if you can pick kind of a group of pilot users. I would encourage you to pick people who you think will be challenging to work with. Like that's okay because they're going to give you the raw kind of unfiltered feedback on what works and doesn't work. So we try to seek that out when we're launching this solution
Mm-hmm.
so that we are integrating their feedback into the program because that is one of the biggest ways you can increase adoption is if
Right.
you think the most skeptical frontline workers, if they buy into the program, then the rest of your frontline workers will understand. And the way that that happens is you help them and engage with them in designing
Mm-hmm.
the actual workflow. So the questions that you're
Right.
asking, the way people are using the wearables, ask for their specific feedback and they'll buy in if their feedback is considered and
Mm-hmm.
incorporated. And then naturally that kind of word spreads like wildfire across your enterprise. But yeah, I get very excited about implementation because I think that intentional approach is what it's
Yeah.
all about. Both of our tools are there to help you get to that destination. No
Yeah.
one just buys them for fun, right? Like we're all here to get to the outcomes, and I think that's how you can get it a lot faster.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I've got an interesting one here. So for a hazard recognition process, doesn't the decision workflow, like requesting instructions to avoid a hazard, diminish the hazard recognition skills of the worker?
Hmm, that's an interesting question.
Isn't
Um,
it?
yeah, that is a good question. I mean, I don't know if we've studied that, but
Hmm.
what I found is that you definitely will see an increase in the hazards that are being identified and recognized, because it's just as Anna mentioned, the lower barrier to entry.
Hmm.
So we'd have to do a little bit more probably post-launch like analysis and surveying to kind of see what the cognitive part of hazard recognition is.
Hmm.
But I think what we've almost always seen is an increase in the number of hazards, but oftentimes
Hmm.
a decrease in like the severity of the impact of those
Hmm.
hazards, is usually what we're chasing down. So I
Hmm.
mentioned this very briefly, but we work with a very large engine manufacturer. They rolled out a JSA program using Frontline operations, and they went from, I think it was around 40 or so electrical incidents one year, and the year after we rolled out this program, they went to zero. So that just kind of showcases they're still recognizing those hazards. Those hazards didn't just magically disappear, obviously, but we gave them the tools to help identify those quicker in real time.
Hmm.
So that'd be one example, but that's, yeah, very interesting question.
Yeah.
Anything you would add?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I think anytime you arm somebody and you roll out a new program and you provide tools, I think there is an alertness and awareness that just kind of happens naturally,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it increases the awareness of that hazard detection, and yeah, we've only seen an increase in reporting and understanding, and then like you said, also the reduction in the claims and the incident frequency and definitely the severity of it. So, yeah, interesting approach, interesting question.
I actually want to throw in some color commentary too, because
Yeah.
I obviously as we've been doing a lot of research into the applications of artificial intelligence, I think one of the main concerns that I hear all the time is this idea of cognitive decline or cognitive
Yeah.
submission because you're
Mm-hmm.
using AI for, some of those thinking skills. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is, in a lot of the studies that I've looked at, and uh you've got to be
Mm-hmm.
careful when you're looking at these studies, like who's funding it and what is the intent behind the study. But um you know there is this idea that you're pushing some of those critical thinking skills off onto the AI or the technology that you're using. uh at the same time, um the human brain only has a certain amount of capacity for critical thinking. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, you are freeing up the cognitive capacity for the more important things while you're having the technology do the more mundane things. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure there's a lot of studies that are primed for, risk perceptions and hazard recognition when using technology tools, and there's some out there already, but I am of the mind that AI is going to help smart people get smarter. And if you
Mm-hmm.
want to be lazy, then it's going to make you lazier. It just kind of
Yeah,
is what it is. That's a
yeah.
Dr. Matt Wall opinion, not an NSC opinion, by the way. I'm just going to put it right out there. But
Yep.
um,
Yeah.
there is a lot of science to, freeing up the cognitive
Mm-hmm.
uh capacity of the human brain to
Mm-hmm.
focus on the
Yeah,
the more human things,
yeah.
or the more
You know,
important things.
if I could just add to that, one thing we're looking at that same information, right, and better understanding
Hmm.
how workers and humans are engaging with these systems, right? And our solution, as well as Jake said, Benchmark, but Make You Safe is in the business of gathering really rich data and helping, informing those decisions that people are making, feeding those AI LLMs or the engines that help you make better decisions. So we're looking at how do we make the capacity or the job that the human has to do so much better,
Hmm.
and how do we make the reality of what they're facing, how do you boil it down a little easier to so that they can actually make better decisions quicker to make
Right.
those that impact even sooner to workers' health and their well-being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We probably could do a whole nother webinar on this topic. I love this
Yeah.
Oh,
question.
absolutely.
So,
That's why I was like, I don't want to get too deep, but
Yeah. Yeah.
well, I'll just
there's
briefly add, I think there's intelligent ways to incorporate AI so it behaves. And you'll notice I
Hmm.
use the word safety coach a lot because
Hmm.
I think there's a very big difference between using AI to initially identify the hazards versus being the coach, right? If you think about a coach, you're still the one on the football field and the coach is giving you feedback on your performance. Like that's our
Hmm.
vision for how we're using AI. And I think in
Hmm.
that scenario, I know when I played football, I valued my coach's input, right? Because it made me a better player. That's really how we're thinking through AI. We wouldn't want it to be, hey, the AI is the player on the field
Hmm.
doing all the things. That's still going to
Hmm.
be a human, especially with the high risk frontline operations. Like those sorts
Right.
of things are really challenging to think through an AI doing.
Yeah.
So just adding that analogy, but yeah, that'll be another webinar topic, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Good.
Let's see. We've got time for, I think, one more question here. You talked about combining Benchmark GenSuite's behavioral data with MakeUsafe's physiological and environmental data. Can you give a concrete example where one signal caught something the other would have missed?
Hmm.
Good example. Yeah.
Yeah. So, our integration, which is pretty new. So sometimes it's kind of contextual and what we think could actually possibly happen. But we are currently integrated with Benchmark Gen Suite in our My Voice concern reporting, right? And so it's at a bottling location. Actually, I think I can say the name of the company. Refresco, international bottling company, they have adopted this, right? So they're using the My Voice feature to raise concerns, to identify issues that are that the frontline workers are seeing, and so they are using that. And when they're whether it's a quality issue or need to stop work or a near miss, identifying the leak on the floor, they're using that and then sending it to concern reporting in Benchmark in the app. And it's a friction-free way to do that. And then that kicks off a whole workflow of, all right, how do we mitigate that risk? Um, how do we approach the worker health and safety using that information and data?
Yeah. I think the other example that I would add is, and just from my experience, so kind of previous to me, this was more an account manager and implementation. We work with a lot of utilities and in this rural southeast of the country. We were just before we started the webinar, we were talking about heat.
Mm-hmm.
Mobile devices don't capture that typically,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and that's becoming more and more of I think we can probably do another webinar on heat stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not if that's not a question that's being captured in a workflow, we're not directly
Mm-hmm.
asking about that, but it's still very much environmental consideration. So in
Mm-hmm.
that situation, like MakeUsafe would be adding on to frontline hazards that are already being identified. Of course, we
Right.
ask about weather and some of those things. So that's what we mean by both,
Mm-hmm.
using kind of both in tandem. And then in terms of kind of core integrations, I mean, we're really excited to work with our customers to kind of develop where they think it makes sense. I think they could
Right.
together, like exactly like Anna mentioned. You could also kind of use them separately too, or
Mm-hmm.
one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
It really just depends on
Right.
your business and your footprint. So,
Yeah.
yeah, those are probably some examples there that a mobile device wouldn't capture, and then a wearable
Mm-hmm.
couldn't take a picture necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's
Right.
something you're going to use a mobile device for.
Right.
Awesome.
Good.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you all joining today. Anna, Jake, this has been a great discussion. Any final thoughts before we close out for the day?
No, just appreciate the opportunity to connect with you all. Definitely feel free to reach out. I know NSC will be sending
Yep.
follow up, so we'll be eager if you have any other questions. You can reach out to us.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining, and appreciate you all being supportive of National Safety Month. For everybody that's still on, I believe the slides will be available after this, and also a recording of the webinar. And then if you need verification of attendance, you can always reach out to us at work2zero@nsc.org, and we can provide a validation that you were here on the Zoom call. But aside from that. Thank you all, and have a great rest of the week.
Awesome.
Great.
Matt,
Thanks.
thanks, Hannah. Thanks,
Take
Anna.
care. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks all.